That girl won't last 1 week in Lagos. The whole bus park laughed. Amina stood there holding an old suitcase, with a split corner, tied shut with a strip of nylon rope. Inside were 4 sets of clothes, 1 notebook, and a small bag of roasted groundnuts her mother had made the night before. "Who does she think she is?" a neighbor said, not bothering to lower her voice. "The vegetable seller's daughter, going to Lagos. 3 months. In 3 months she'll be back here, with her face on the ground, you'll see." Then Musa came. Musa, the boy she had loved for 2 years, the one who had sat, with her under the mango tree, and talked about a small house, with a green tin roof. Amina turned, and for 1 second she thought he had come to see her off. But he stopped 3 steps away, both hands in his pockets, and he said, "I think you should stay." "Musa. What are you going up there to do? You have no certificate. You don't know anyone." He shrugged. "You're just a vegetable seller's daughter, Amina. Wherever you go, you'll still be a vegetable seller's daughter." Then he turned and walked away. Right there in the bus park, in front of a dozen people, Amina stood frozen, her hand gripping the suitcase handle. And then her mother stepped forward. Halima said nothing to the crowd. She did not argue with a single one of them. She simply walked up, took her daughter's 2 hands in hers, and said quietly enough that only the 2 of them could hear, "My daughter, I have no money to give you. I have no connections in Lagos. I only have 1 sentence, and you must remember it for the rest of your life." She gripped her daughter's hands tighter. "Never let anyone else decide your worth." Amina boarded the bus. She sat by the window, and she watched her village shrink away in a cloud of red dust. She was 19 years old. She had no degree. She did not have 1 naira in reserve. And she had no idea that 10 years later, the very people laughing at her in that bus park would be lining up to ask for her help. Stay with me until the end of this story. And if you have ever been told you would never amount to anything, subscribe right now, because this story is for you. This is the story of Amina. Amina Bello grew up in Alara, a village nearly 6 hours by road from Lagos. Her father died when she was 8. From then on, her mother sold vegetables at the village market, out to the garden at 5 in the morning to cut them, carrying them to the market, sitting there until evening. They were poor enough that Amina walked to school in a pair of sandals she had stitched back together 3 times. There was a rhythm to those years she would carry all her life. Waking before the sun to help carry the baskets to the market. Doing her homework by the light of a kerosene lamp, because there was no electricity for weeks at a stretch. Learning to say "I already ate," so convincingly that her mother sometimes believed her. But she was bright. Not ordinary bright, she came first in her school 7 years in a row. The headmaster once came to the house himself to tell her mother that this child had to continue her education. "Madam," he said, standing in their small yard, "children like this one come along maybe twice in a teacher's whole career. Don't let this one go to waste." Her mother thanked him, walked him to the road, came back inside, and sat down on a stool, without saying anything for a long time. The day she got her university admission letter, the house went silent. Because the first year's fees were what her mother earned in 2 years. That night Amina heard her mother crying in the kitchen. She cried very softly, the way people cry, when they don't want anyone to hear. The next morning, Amina folded the letter away, and said, "Mama, I'm not going. I'll stay and help you." And she stayed. For a whole year. Then Auntie Beezy came home, from Lagos for a family memorial. Auntie Beezy was a distant cousin of her mother's, who had married in Lagos, and owned a house in Ikeja. She looked Amina over and said, "Let the girl come to Lagos with me. She'll stay in my house, eat my food. I'll find her work. If she stays here her life will be finished." Her mother looked at her daughter. Amina nodded. That is how she came to be on that bus. Auntie Beezy's house in Acadia was a decent 2-story building. Amina arrived at 9 at night, exhausted after 6 hours on the road, but she still smiled, and greeted every person politely. Auntie Beezy walked her around. This is the sitting room. This is Kemi's room. This is Tolu's room. Then she led her down to the kitchen. She pointed at a bare patch of floor between the fridge and the table. Spread your mat here. The kitchen is cool at night. Amina stood looking at the strip of cement floor. Yes, Auntie, she said. That first night she lay on the kitchen floor listening to the fridge humming beside her ear, telling herself, it's fine. I've only just arrived. Things will change. But things did not change. For in the morning, Auntie Beezy woke her. Sweep the house. Mop. Cook breakfast for everyone. Iron the school uniforms for the 2 cousins. Wash the dishes. Hand wash the clothes for a household of 5. Mind the 3-year-old. Go to the market. Cook lunch. Cook dinner. Wash the dishes again. No wages. Because you eat my food, don't you? And the cousins gave her a name. Not Amina. Hey, village girl, get me a cup of water. Where's the village girl? Where's my shirt? Once, Kemi brought friends home. Amina carried out drinks, and Kemi said to the group, right in front of her. This one is my cousin from the village. Proper bush girl. She won't understand anything you say. They all laughed. Amina set the tray down, lowered her head, and went back to the kitchen. That night, lying on the cement floor, she took out the notebook she had brought from home. And she wrote a single line on the first page, never let anyone else decide your worth. She read it 3 times. Then she closed the notebook, held it against her chest, and slept. After 4 months, Amina began looking for work. She did it in the scraps of free time she had, at midday, while the toddler slept. She borrowed transport money from the small gift her mother had given her, and she went. She applied to 30 places. 30 shops, offices, restaurants, supermarkets. Anywhere with a sign in the window. The answer was almost always the same. Do you have a degree? No, sir. Experience? Not yet, sir. But I learn very fast. And once, the time she would never forget, a man at a recruitment office picked up her form, read the line, where she had written her hometown, and laughed out loud. Ilara? Where is Ilara? He turned to his colleague, holding the form up. Do you know where Ilara is? The other man shook his head, grinning. He put the form down, and pushed it back across the desk toward her. Go home. This place isn't for you. Amina walked out of that building and walked 3 kilometers, because she had no transport money left. But at the 31st place, someone said yes. A small clothing shop in Yaba. The owner looked her over and said, fine. 1 month trial. The pay is very small. Amina almost cried right there on the floor. She worked there for 8 months. She was the first to arrive, and the last to leave. She memorized the price of every item. She remembered the regular customers by name. The shop's sales went up, and the owner started letting her hold the keys. Then one afternoon, money was missing from the till. A significant amount. The owner called all 3 staff together. And a woman named Ronk, who had worked there for 3 years, the one the owner trusted, spoke up immediately. I saw Amina open the till at lunchtime, Ma. There was nobody else in the shop. Amina spun around. What are you saying? I never opened the till, I saw it, with my own eyes. You're lying. Why are you shouting? Ronk turned to the owner, her face full of sorrow. Ma, I didn't even want to say it. But she's new in the city, her family is poor, I just thought maybe she was desperate. The owner looked at Amina for a long moment. And Amina understood that she had lost before she ever opened her mouth. Because in that room, her word was the word of a village girl who had been in the city 8 months. And Rong's word was the word of someone who had been there 3 years. Go home, the owner said. I won't call the police. But don't come back. Amina stood on the pavement outside that shop for nearly an hour. She did not cry. She just stood there holding a bag of her things, with nowhere to go. And that same evening, her phone rang. It was Musa. For nearly a year he had not called. Not one message. She answered, and something stupid in her chest still hoped. Hello? Amina? It's me. Musa. Yes. I'm calling to tell you something. I'm getting married next month. Silence. I'm marrying Adamu's daughter. Her family has the building materials shop in town. Amina stood there, her hands shaking. Why did you have to call and tell me? Well, I thought you should know. And I also wanted to say, come home, Amina. Stop trying. What are you going to achieve up there? You have no future. Then he hung up. That night, Amina lay on the kitchen floor in Auntie Beezy's house and cried. She cried from 11 at night until nearly 4 in the morning. She cried so much that the next day her eyes were swollen enough that Auntie Beezy asked if she had an eye infection. She cried because she had been falsely accused. Because she had been abandoned. Because of the cold cement floor. Because the whole village had been right and she had been wrong. And somewhere in the middle of that night, she did the thing that frightened her most. She let herself imagine going back. Stepping off the bus at that same park. Walking past the same women. Seeing their faces arrange themselves into that particular look, not anger, not even cruelty, just the quiet satisfaction of people who had been proved correct. She imagined it so clearly that she could almost hear it. And she understood that she would rather sleep on that cement floor for another year than let that be the ending. And around 4 in the morning, as the sky began to turn, she sat up, took out her notebook, and read the line she had written 11 months earlier. Never let anyone else decide your worth. She sat looking at it for a long time. Then she took a pen, and underneath it she wrote a second line. Even when they are right about you today. That morning, Amina made a decision. She would not go home. Not out of pride. But because she understood that if she went home now, she would go home wearing the exact label they had stuck on her, and she would wear it for the rest of her life. But she also could not stay in Auntie Beezy's house forever. So she did the only thing she could do. With the 3,000 naira she had left, she bought a cheap cooler, some ice, and sachet water. And she went and stood on a street corner near the bus stop. 6 in the morning until 7 at night. In the sun. In the rain. She sold sachet water for 4 months. They were the hardest 4 months of her life, and also the ones that taught her the most. She learned which hour of the day the buses came thickest. She learned that, if she stood 20 meters further up the road, she caught the passengers before the other sellers did. She learned to buy her ice from the man whose blocks lasted an hour longer, even though he charged more, because melted ice was money on the ground. She learned, in other words, how a business actually works, not from a classroom, but from a cooler box on a street corner. And every single night, no matter how tired she was, she wrote the day's numbers in her notebook. What she sold. What she spent. What was left. Some nights what was left was almost nothing. She wrote it down anyway. And on that corner, there was an old woman, who passed by almost every day. She walked slowly, leaning on a stick, and she always stopped to buy 1 sachet at around 4 in the afternoon. At first the two of them said nothing to each other. Then it became a greeting. Then it became short conversations. Her name was Mama Yemisi. One day she stood longer than usual, watching Amina restack her cooler, and she asked, "How far did you go in school?" "I finished secondary school, Ma. I got university admission, but there was no money." "How long have you been standing on this corner?" "4 months, Ma." The old woman nodded slowly. Then she asked a strange question. "How much profit do you make in a day?" Amina told her the figure. "And how much have you saved?" Amina hesitated. Then she told her the truth. The old woman raised her eyebrows. "You saved that much? Out of that profit?" "Yes, Ma. I write everything down. What I sell each day, what I spend, what's left." And she pulled a small, battered notebook from her pocket, and handed it over. Mama Yemisi took it, turned a few pages, and stayed silent for quite a while. Then she said, "My son has a small company in Ikoyi. They need a receptionist. The pay is not high, but there's health cover, and more importantly, there's somewhere to climb." She handed the notebook back. "I have never asked anybody to hire anyone in my life. But a girl, who stands here selling sachet water for 4 months, and still records every single naira, that girl should not be standing on this corner forever." 3 days later, Amina walked into the building of Crestline Limited in the best clothes she owned. She got the job. And this is where the story could have ended, with an ordinary happy ending. A village girl gets a stable office job, and that's enough. But Amina did not see it that way. In her very first week, she realized something. She did not understand half of what people said in that office. They talked about margins. About KPIs. About forecasts. They typed spreadsheets full of formulas that looked to her like a pile of numbers. And their English flowed in a way hers did not. So Amina built herself a timetable. 6:30 in the morning, wake up. 8 to 5, work the front desk. 6 to 9 at night, study. 9 to 1 in the morning, keep studying. 1 in the morning, sleep. 4 hours a night. For 3 years. There is a version of this story where that sentence sounds inspiring. The real version was not inspiring. It was 3 years of a headache that never fully went away. 3 years of falling asleep on the bus and missing her stop. 3 years of watching colleagues go out on Friday evenings, while she went back to a rented room and opened a laptop she had bought secondhand and paid off in 4 installments. Nobody clapped for her during those 3 years. Nobody knew. That is the part people leave out when they tell these stories, that the years that change your life almost always happen in a room where no one is watching. She learned English from free videos, earphones plugged into an old phone. She learned Excel, starting from not knowing what cell A1 was, all the way to writing lookup formulas. She learned basic accounting. She took free marketing courses. She read every report anyone ever left behind on the reception desk. And she did one thing nobody asked her to do. Whenever a meeting needed someone to take minutes, and no one was available, she asked to sit in and do it. No extra pay. No one requested it. She simply said, "I can take the notes, sir." Over 2 years, she sat in more than 200 meetings. She listened to how decisions were made. She heard why one contract was won and another lost. She heard the mistakes the company made, over and over again. And she wrote it all down in her notebook, the notebook that still carried that line on the first page. In her 3rd year, the branch director, a man named Mr. Bassi, put a hard problem to the sales department: find a way to cut the transport costs that were eating into their margins. The whole department went around in circles for 2 weeks. Then one afternoon, the receptionist knocked on his door. "Sorry sir, I have something. I'm probably wrong, but I still wanted you to see it." Mr. Bassi took the stack of paper, with the face of a man being polite. Then he read it. Then he stopped being polite. Amina had sat through 200 meetings taking minutes. She knew which routes the company shipped on, at what hours, with which haulier. And she had spent 4 months of evenings building a comparison model, along with a proposal to merge routes, shift delivery windows, and renegotiate with 2 of the haulage firms. The number on the bottom line, 18% saved. Mr. Bassi looked up. You did this alone? Yes, sir. Where did you learn this? Amina told the truth. Online, sir. At night. 3 weeks later, Amina was moved to the operations department. A year later, she was a team lead. And the year after that, at 26, she became the youngest manager in the history of Crestline. She had moved out of Auntie Beezy's house long before. She rented a small room of her own. And every month she sent money home to her mother. Once her mother called, and said, a little hesitantly, "My daughter, Ngozi next door asked me what exactly you do up there, that you send so much money every month." She asked it in a way like she didn't believe me. Amina laughed. "Just tell her I work in an office, Mama." I did. Her mother was quiet for a moment. "My daughter, I am so proud of you." Amina hung up, and sat still for a long time in her small rented room. She had come so far. She had no idea she was about to lose everything all over again. At 27, Crestline was preparing to expand into 3 northern states. And Amina was given the project. She worked on it for 8 months. She traveled. She met more than 50 suppliers. She built the entire financial model, the staffing plan, the rollout timeline. The proposal ran to 120 pages. And the person working alongside her, the one she trusted most in the company, was Tund. Tund was 4 years older, properly university educated, from a comfortable family. He was friendly, funny, and the first person in that company who treated her like a colleague instead of the girl who used to sit at reception. She shared everything with him. Every file. Every number. Every idea. 2 weeks before the presentation to the board, Mr. Bassi, the man who had promoted her, retired. His replacement was a new director from head office. He had no idea who Amina was. And 3 days before the presentation, Tun submitted the proposal. Under his own name. All 120 pages. Every figure. Every chart. Only the cover page changed. Amina walked straight into his office. "What have you done?" Tun did not even look flustered. He just shrugged. "Amina, calm down. This was a team project." "A team project? Did you travel to Kano with me? Did you sit building the financial model until 3 in the morning? Keep your voice down." He glanced at the door. "And think about it properly. The new director needs to see somebody who can lead this project. Who do you think he'll believe? A man with a master's degree or a former receptionist who never finished university?" He said it perfectly calmly, as though he were discussing the weather. And that was the sentence that made Amina understand that in 3 years, he had never once seen her as a colleague. She took it to the new director. She brought evidence, original files, emails, photographs from the site visits. The new director listened for 15 minutes. Then he tapped his pen on the desk and said, "Miss Amina, I have been here 2 weeks. I don't want to begin with an internal scandal. You should sort this out with your colleague privately." 3 weeks later, HR called her in. The reason on the termination letter, departmental restructuring. Amina walked out of the Crestline building on a Friday afternoon carrying a cardboard box of her personal things. She was 27. No job. No savings, because she had just sent most of it home to fix her mother's roof. No new lease, because hers expired the following month. She sat on a bench in a nearby park for 2 hours. And do you know what she was thinking about? She was thinking about Musa. About what he had said in the bus park. About the whole village that had laughed at her. For those 2 hours, for the first time in 8 years, Amina seriously considered going home. If it were you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments, I really want to know. But then she opened her bag. And she took out the old notebook. The spine had come apart, the cover had been replaced 3 times, but the first page still carried 2 lines. Never let anyone else decide your worth. Even when they are right about you today. Amina sat on that bench and did a very cold piece of arithmetic. She had no degree. But she had 8 years of operations experience. She had no capital. But she had 120 pages of knowledge about how to build a business model, because she was the one who had written them. And she had one thing nobody at Crestline had. She knew the women in her village. She knew her mother, and her mother's friends sat weaving baskets, dyeing cloth, and making handmade bags in the quiet afternoons, pieces beautiful enough that foreign visitors had once stopped their cars to ask about them. And she knew they sold them for almost nothing to middlemen, because they had no other way to reach the world. Amina stood up from that bench. She borrowed a very small amount, just enough for materials for 20 bags, and 3 months of the cheapest room she could find. She went back to the village once. She sat in her mother's yard, with 11 women. And she told them. Make them. Whatever you make, I'll take all of it. I'll pay you 3 times what the middlemen pay. But I have 3 conditions: on time, correct quality, and every piece must match the sample exactly. The women looked at one another. Where will you get money to pay 3 times? One of them asked. I don't have it yet, Amina said honestly. But I will sell them. And I will pay you. Amina's first shop was a page on the internet, with photographs taken on an old phone against a piece of cloth spread on her rented floor. The first month, she sold 4 bags. The second month, 19. There were weeks in between, when nothing sold at all. There was a month, when she ate 1 meal a day, so that she could pay the 11 women on time, because she had promised them, and because she remembered exactly how it felt to work and not be paid. She answered every customer message herself, at any hour. She packed every order herself. When a bag arrived damaged, she replaced it, and paid the postage twice, even when it wiped out the profit on 4 other orders. By the 6th month, she had to bring in 2 more women, from the village. And Amina did one thing her competitors did not: every product shipped, with a small card carrying the name and photograph of the woman who had made it. It was not a marketing trick. She did it because she remembered what it felt like to be called the village girl. But it turned out foreign customers loved it. In year 2, a fashion magazine in Britain ran a piece on her brand. In year 3, she had her first warehouse. In year 4, she registered the company, and named it Alara and Company. After the village, whose name people had once laughed at, when she said it out loud. In year 6, her products were exported to 11 countries. In year 8, Alara and Company had more than 400 rural women working across its production chain, and Amina Bello, 35 years old, sat in the managing director's chair. Then one morning in March, her assistant placed a file on her desk. Ma, this came from the investment fund. There's a company that needs emergency capital. They thought you might be interested, since it's the same logistics sector. Amina opened the file. And she saw the name on the cover page. Crestline Limited. She sat very still for a long time. Her assistant looked at her. Ma, is something wrong? No, Amina said. Put it in the diary for me. I'll attend the meeting. The meeting was on a Wednesday morning, in the very building she had walked out of 8 years earlier, with a cardboard box. Amina arrived 15 minutes early. She crossed the lobby where she had sat working reception for 3 years. And at the security desk, a man stood up to greet her. Amina stopped. He was much older than she remembered. His hair was going gray at the sides. He had a heavier middle. The security uniform sat slightly loose on his shoulders. But she recognized him instantly. Musa. He recognized her too. She watched it happen on his face, the recognition, then the confusion, then something very much like shame. He took half a step back. Amina stopped at the desk. In that moment, she could have said any number of things. She could have repeated his words, from the bus park. She could have asked if he remembered what he said to her in front of a dozen people. She looked at him. Then she said, "Good morning. Please, which way is the meeting room on the 4th floor?" Musa swallowed. "Ah, the lift on the left, ma. 4th floor, turn right." "Thank you." And she walked on. She said nothing more. Because standing in front of him, she understood something. She no longer needed him to know who she had become. There were 7 people in the 4th floor meeting room. Crestline's current chief executive, the same man, who had once tapped his pen on a desk, and told her to sort it out, with her colleague privately. And seated to his right, now the deputy managing director, was Tund. When Amina walked in, the whole room stood. Then Tund saw her face. He stood halfway up, and dropped back, into his chair. "Amina." "Good morning, Tund," she said, her voice completely level. "It's been a long time." The chief executive looked between the two of them. "You know each other?" "Yes," Amina said, setting her briefcase on the table. "I worked here for 8 years. For the first 3, I sat at the reception desk downstairs." The silence in that meeting room was something Tund would remember for a long time. The meeting ran 2 hours. Amina did not mention the past once. She asked about cash flow. About receivables. About cost structure. She identified 3 holes in their operating model, that nobody in the room could defend, because they were the same 3 holes she had written about in a 120-page proposal 8 years earlier, the proposal Tund had put his own name on. At the end, the chief executive asked, his voice dry, "So, would you be interested in investing?" Amina closed the file. "Yes," she said. "I will invest. On 3 conditions." The room held its breath. "First, your entire recruitment process must drop the degree requirement for any position that doesn't strictly require it. Replace it with a practical skills test." She turned a page. "Second, remove the hometown field from your application form. Nobody in this company will be judged by where they were born." She looked up. "Third, every year this company takes on a minimum of 20 interns, from rural areas, paid, and with real training." The chief executive blinked. "That's all?" "That's all." He seemed to be waiting for something else. A condition about senior personnel. A name that needed to go. But Amina simply closed her briefcase and stood. When most of the room had cleared, Tund lingered. "Amina." She stopped at the door. I know I owe you an apology." Amina turned to look at him. "You don't owe me an apology, Tund," she said. 8 years ago I needed one. Now I don't." She paused. "But there's one thing I want you to know. That proposal, you kept the name on the cover page. But you didn't keep the mind that wrote it. That's why, 8 years later, you're sitting on that side of the table, and I'm sitting on this one." Then she walked out. 3 months later, Amina went back to Alara. Not to visit. To break ground. She built a primary school, 10 classrooms, with electricity and proper toilets, things her own school had never had. She built a small library beside it, and she shelved the first books, with her own hands. And she set up a scholarship fund. The fund covered full university fees for any bright child in the village, whose family could not afford it, the exact thing that no one had done for her 16 years earlier. She named it the Halima Scholarship Fund, after her mother. On the opening day, the whole village came. There were faces Amina recognized immediately. The neighbor who had said in 3 months she'll be back. Some of the people, who had laughed in the bus park. Now they stood at the back, clapping softly, not quite able to look at her directly. And there was a small woman, her hair nearly all gray, sitting in the front row in the best clothes she owned. When they invited Amina up to say a few words, she held the microphone, and stayed silent for quite a while. Then she said, 16 years ago, I left this village, with a suitcase tied shut with rope. A lot of people laughed at me that day. I remember all of it. Every single one. The compound went completely still. But I am not standing here today to bring that up. I am standing here for a different reason. She turned toward the front row. That day, in the middle of all that laughter, one woman walked up, took my hands, and said, "Never let anyone else decide your worth." Her voice cracked slightly. I have lived 16 years on that one sentence. Then she stepped down, went to her mother, and crouched in front of her. Halima wrapped her arms around her daughter and wept. She wept the way people weep when they have waited so long for something that they had stopped letting themselves wait for it. "You did it," she said. "You proved them wrong." Amina shook her head. And she said the words the village would still be repeating to each other years later. "No, Mama. I didn't go to the city to prove them wrong." She squeezed her mother's hands. "I went to prove you right." Amina's story reminds us of a few very simple things. The world will try to put a label on you, from the very first day, by where you were born, by what's in your pocket, by the certificate you don't have. And the dangerous part is not that they put the label on you. It's the day you look down, read it, and start to believe it. Amina was rejected 30 times. She was falsely accused. She was abandoned by the man she loved at the moment she had nothing. She had 8 months of work stolen from her. She was fired with nothing in her pocket. She did not rise on luck. She rose on 4 hours of sleep a night for 3 years, on 200 meetings, where she took minutes for free, and on one battered notebook she opened every time she wanted to give up. And when she finally stood high enough to crush every person who had once crushed her, she chose to do something else instead. She opened the door that had been slammed in her face, and then she held it open for everyone coming behind her. Because revenge only proves that they hurt you. Building something proves they could not stop you. If this story touched you, leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next story.